There's a famous French scientist named Priory who used what's called a phase conjugate dielectric field. The Priory device, P-R-I-O-R-E. Priory, very famous. Tom Bearden wrote about it extensively. Bill may mention it after me. But the Priory device was implosive plasma, phase conjugate optics and dielectrics, phase conjugate optics and dielectrics, a flame. And in there, the French government documented in that field thousands of cases of cancer were healed, documented by the government. Elizabeth Rauscher took the same frequencies, which are called phase conjugate, for magnets, and did an FDA study, showed dramatic pain reduction inside the compression flame, the compression field. The same frequencies, phase conjugate magnetics. We can show you the equation for those frequencies later. It's called phase conjugate magnetics. Now, I don't want to get into the really fancy physics right away. I want us to really grok the meaning of this, the implication of this. And so I want to really get to this issue of how you make a flame with your mind. Because if you knew how, you would be steering tornadoes, you would be making plasma fusion energies, you would be a sun god, you know? You'd be the Holy Grail, right? So, I'm asking you and me today if we can learn how to make a flame with our mind. And I'm asking you as an electric engineer. Now, here's a few more clues. You know that for many years, my partner Valerie and I have been traveling the world, and I pioneered a technology called the Bliss tuner. Bliss tuner. And with the Bliss tuner, we were able to measure. This is a lady in Australia having a bliss experience, and just at this moment right here, she's going, And there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 harmonics in her brain waves precisely at golden mean ratio. There's been a lot of discussion here in this conference already about golden mean ratio. Well, I pioneered the measurement of golden mean ratio in brain waves. This is, on the right is your right hemisphere, on the left is the left hemisphere. This is the delta, theta, this is the alpha in the brainwaves. This is alpha at around 8.5 hertz there. And you see, when these lines line up here, the computer is telling us that she has achieved golden mean ratio between the frequency of the alpha, which is here, and the frequency of the beta, which is here. There it is. In fact, maybe I'll just pause that for a moment. Yeah. So, from here at 8.5 hertz to here at just under 14 hertz, the ratio between the frequencies of the alpha and the betas is golden mean. Now, so this led me to hypothesize that golden mean ratio in brain waves correlated to peak perception, bliss, euphoria, ecstasy. And others before me had worked in that direction. My good friend, Professor Konstantin Korotkov in Russia, did a lot of work in that. So we came up with a model of what is peak perception, golden mean ratio in EEG. And it kind of looks like this. This is what your brain waves are doing. Your brain waves are making these harmonics called a caduceus, which in physics is called conjugating phases. Conjugate means to add and multiply recurrently. recursively, which is exactly what only golden mean ratio allows. So you get these two, we call it two pine cones kissing noses. Did I put that animation in here? When two pine cones kiss noses, oh, here we go, pine cones kissing noses. Here's the two pine cones right here in the bottom right. Right there. You see the two pine cones right there? The two purple pine cones right there. Now, your brain waves are making those harmonics, and the point between where they cross, right at the center, is where you make a flame in your mind. You're creating compression. It's called a phase conjugate model of compression. You know, when you have Kundalini, you feel this intense burning fire in your pineal gland. I've been there for 30 years, so I kind of know what that is. And we now know where that flame in your mind comes from. It's called a phase conjugate model of perception. Now, as I began teaching this, I met another scientist who was also teaching that perception is caused by phase conjugation, the caduceus, recursive anti-multiplying. His name is Stephen Lehi. And he said, yes, it's true that the way when you see a gestalt, the whole image, the way you auto-determine the boundary conditions, that you self-organize your relationship to the whole, the only way to explain that, he says, is a phase conjugate model of perception. Now, here's another clue. I'm going to give you a few more clues, and then we're going to try to answer the puzzle. Here's the next clue. The clue to what makes a flame in the mind. Here's the next clue. The fact that focused human attention causes electric fields to compress. It's well documented and it's measurable. This is the book. It's called Conscious Acts of Creation by one of the most famous physicists, a good friend at the time, it's Bill Tiller, Stanford University. And he showed dozens of examples that when people focus their attention, it causes electric fields to compress. It causes compression, implosion. Basically, charge is concentrated in the presence of focused human attention. So electrically, we know for sure that when you're about making a flame in your mind, it causes the electric field around you to compress. Now, Bill Tiller never explained how that happens. Our job today is to do that. Now I'm going to give you another clue. There's another famous person. His name is Ingo Swann. My friend Bill Donovan, who's speaking after me today, helped me understand this. I'd like to acknowledge Bill for this part. Bill pointed out that when they found out that Ingo Swann, he was a famous psychic, you might have heard of him. He did remote viewing to the backside of the moon and discovered there's some astral parasites there. Very messy. But Ingo Swann was famous that when he used his focused attention, called it psychokinesis, that it would restore damaged trypsin enzymes, life. So he could create life with his attention. We can understand how now because the enzymes were restored to life by his attention for the same reason that seeds germinate faster in a compression field like stone. Very measurable. So, the physicists, the scientists, and the link to this conversation, the web link to this conversation, are in the web link which is dedicated to this lecture today. That's the link where all of the material from today's lecture is located. fractalfield.com/conjugate mind. The mind that conjugates together stays together. I mean, the family that lives together loves together. So, what is a conjugate mind? So, it turns out that the scientists decided to review Ingo Swann's ability to make a flame with his mind. And they put a thermistor that was sensing temperature at a distance. Now, by the way, if you want to do what the tokamak and all the fusion projects are trying to do, but fail, all you have to do is control heat at a distance. If you can control heat at a distance, for example, through a metal container, you are the answer to plasma fusion. It's called plasma containment. It's the biggest problem out there. Ask Nassim. He talks about it all the time. Didn't figure out the answer, but he knows the question. So, to be able to control the heat at a distance means you have control of fusion. So they did some studies with Ingo Swann because he seemed to be able to control heat at a distance. So here's a thermistor. Instead of a flame, it's a temperature sensor. And they put it at a distance, and sure enough, he focuses, and the thermistor starts to get hot. Flame with your mind. So they said, we got to figure out how he's doing that. So they put a metal screen between Ingo Swann and the thermistor, and they grounded that metal screen. Now, if you're an electrical engineer like Bill, you know that no electromagnetic normal frequency, no radio waves, no microwave, nothing is going to get through a metal screen that's grounded. Nothing. Guess what? Consistently, through the grounded metal screen, Ingo Swann could radiate his focus and heat that thermistor, make a flame with his mind at a distance through the screen. That means that he was using some kind of wave that can go through anything. Does that sound like God to you? Does that sound like the spiritual literature about the Holy Ghost? Hello? Well, it turns out that there is one kind of wave in physics that can go through just about anything. It's called a longitudinal wave. I'll show you pictures. So, what we're saying in this lecture is that the solution to naturally centripetal wave nature of mind and consciousness is also the implosive solution to zero-point energy and fusion. The perfect flame is a fire that does not consume. If you ever studied the priests of Atlantis and their Troy stone, their fire crystal in Atlantis, they called it the flame that does not consume. You know what perfect compression, perfect fractal implosion is? It's called non-destructive compression because it does not consume. It's a flame without heat. It's a cool fire. That would be a good bumper sticker on your way to a rock concert or a rave, wouldn't it? A cool flame. So, science has a name for that. It's called phase conjugate dialectics and optics. It's self-organizing. It's naturally centripetal, and it is plasma containment. So, what kind of wave can do that? Well, there's more than two, but we're going to talk about two kinds of waves in physics here. And again, thanks to Bill Donovan and this stuff. So, most of your electromagnetic signatures are a wave that looks like this. It's called a transverse wave. Oops. Whereas on the bottom, this is another kind of wave. It's called a longitudinal wave. See, Transverse waves go like this. That's transverse. Longitudinal waves go like this. That's longitudinal. Longitudinal waves, like sound waves, can go through almost anything, including the mental screen. So, here is an animation of what it would look like inside your brain. This is your right hemisphere of your brain, and this is the left hemisphere of your brain. And here are two longitudinal waves here. There are compression waves like this. Okay? Now, if your brain learns how to do this, like Ingo Swann did, then you can light a flame with your mind. Now, it's interesting that there's a simple way to prove this. Very simple. All we have to do is, when we're measuring the golden ratio in EEG here, all we have to do is prove that the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere are exactly 180 degrees out of phase. So one's going up, one's going down, like this. It's called phase discipline or phase ratio. 180 out of phase, like dancing. So that would mean, if we measured it and if we proved it, that at this point, you can kind of see it here. Let me see if I can get this up here again. See if you can see it. Right here, when the two pine cones are kissing noses,